Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be back with Jared and John to discuss the topic of science and religion. And so last time, almost 2 months ago, Jared and John and we talked about some introductory topics like what is science and the scientific method, academic study of scriptures, historic tensions between science and religion, value of religion and how it could improve in light of scientific insights. But today we will continue our discussion and we will focus on psychological and sociological aspects that influence religiosity. And over the years, science has been able to shed light on important aspects of the human mind and behavior to explain many tendencies that are also applicable in a religious context. So in order for this discussion to be somewhat systematic, I have grouped the items under three broad topics, which are first, how religion emerges among humans. Here we will discuss some scientific theories of how aspects of religion and faith evolved among Homo sapiens and what processes are observable in the development of religions. Second, how religious conversion happens. Here we will discuss the psychological conditions, tendencies, and phenomena that are conducive to a person becoming religious and conversion into a particular religion. And third, how faith is maintained. Here we will discuss how people's minds work in order to preserve faith in their religion in the face of challenges to it, and how religious organizations use various tools in order to ensure the followers' continued adherence. But as I said, let's start with how religion emerges. And guys, do you have any comments you want to make up front about this topic?
Well, actually, if I can say something before that topic really quickly, I think we need to talk about how we talk about religion for just a moment with these really important psychological and sociological issues, because one pattern that I've seen in current discussions of religion is, especially among progressive people, is that we take for granted most of the benefits of religion. Because one of the wonderful things about where we live in the modern world is that there's a very high degree of comfort, there's a very high degree of stability. And as we'll come back to, I think, again and again, these are the primary benefits of religion. And these are the primary benefits of spirituality. Because at a fundamental level, what we as human beings need is we need safety. We need safety. Like, we need to feel safe. If we don't feel safe, we can't really do anything. I'm studying trauma-informed care right now in divinity school, and this is trauma-informed care. The idea that if the person you're talking to does not feel safe, you aren't really talking to them because they're stuck in this survival mode. And the evolutionary genius of religion is that religion provides this sense of security, stability, and relationship. And so I think as we talk about religion, its evolution, conversion, and maintenance, we need to keep in mind that these are the needs that it's fulfilled, because it's easy to take for granted these things in our society and then like nitpick things that we have concerns with around religion or spirituality. Whereas like this is absolutely key to religion and spirituality, that it produces a singular sense of safety and relationship, even when our environments don't produce them. So that's, and then the last thing that I'll say before we jump into origins is it's super important to remember that evolution functions at different levels. And so as we're seeking to survive as individuals, as mating partners, and then as tribes or groups. And so our different impulses are triggered at different times. So one of the most interesting things about human behavior is that sometimes we're very selfish and we're seeking to survive as an individual. And then it's like a switch flips and we're willing to die for our country or whatever. And I think this multi-level selection theory or approach explains what's going on there. So just some things to keep in mind as we come back to these topics.
Now, if I may quickly comment on what you just said, Jared, there are, of course, let's say, non-religious societies that provide individuals these benefits that you talked about, the mental fortitude, ability to...
I would argue there are no non-religious societies.
Okay, so do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, it'll just take a minute. One of my favorite things about Sapiens, which we brought up last time, is Yuval Harari argues that all cultural systems are religions. And I agree with him. And so my definition of religion is a cultural system of interconnected beliefs and rituals in the context of community in reference to transcendent reality. And transcendent reality, I considered switching it to like intersubjective reality, but that's not enough. It genuinely is transcendent, because our culture and our society is dependent on us believing in things bigger than our current tangible reality. So something like a concept like the value of human life is a religion. Government is a religion. Economy is a religion. Popular culture is a religion. Military is a religion. Academia is a religion. And I mean, I believe the purpose of language is to disambiguate. And so I do think it's helpful to talk about like explicit versus implicit religion. But what I would argue, interestingly, Japan, which is one of the most powerful cultures ever, very consciously, as best as we can tell, created like a nationalistic religion. And these very powerful, so governments are functional religions. And so I hear you say, like, I agree with you that in our current world, yes, we do have countries that there is not that explicit religion, but the nationalism, the cultural identity, all of these are functional and implicit religions. And this is what I mean when I say, like, look seriously at the ingredients of religion. Like, just go to a courthouse and like hear that ritualistic language, the ritualistic clothing, the process, and that's religious. Like, if I have if I speed and I get pulled over and I go to court, all of this is religion. Like, none of it's objectively, tangibly real. And so this is what I mean, that we need to take religion seriously, because I think that some conversations about religion are too cavalier. And let me just say that it's provocative and even threatening. And secular people, like many secular people, have an emotional reactivity to the idea of spirituality and religion. And so they don't like acknowledging that. They don't like acknowledging that we are inevitably religious. Because again, I'm not saying we all need God or Jesus. I'm saying that as human beings, we are wired and evolved for meaning, narrative, structure, ritual, relationships. Our lives are organized in certain ways. And one of the biggest differences between like antiquity and the present is that in the present, this idea of secular versus sacred, which is just as much an invention as anything, we now have hidden religions. Whereas in antiquity, religions hid in plain sight, meaning that like all worldviews were religious. And in the modern world, there are these secular religions that pretend not to be religious. And I know that's a bit of a provocative way of putting it, but I welcome your input.
John, do you have a comment on that? Or?
Well, yeah, I love that framing, because I think to have productive discussions about religion, you have to appreciate that commonality and also not try. So, and you don't almost, most of the criticisms of aspects, say, of religion also apply to every other cultural institution that we might have, right? So the excess, what we might describe as the excesses of religion in certain situations, those almost always equally apply to political systems or the university system, or what you name your or the scientific enterprise, whatever that is. Those are actually just sort of human problems a lot of times, and so that's why I think it's so useful to think in those terms, is because and then maybe, I guess that's where to try and get some granularity or resolution, to say, are there problems specific to problems or benefits specific to highly supernatural religions, shall we say, or religions that emphasize the supernatural components more so than say other systems. And again, I agree, like from Jared's framing, you can argue that like all of symbology to some extent is transcendent, is difficult to pin onto any objective reality. So so all of that, but I would say maybe there's a continuum there, and that's something that we could discuss as we dive deeper.
But Jared,
really quick, that fits so nicely with our discussion of science and religion, which is not like science versus religion. It's just because for me, this is why another point that I want to make is that traditional or standard discussions around religion get kind of sloppy and lazy. And we need this level of nuance, because it's super easy to be like, oh, that's a cult, right? Like bad cult, like let's trash the cult. Whereas I prefer to talk about cult strength ideologies. And that just broadens it to pretty much anything. So for example, North Korea is a cult strength nationalistic and political ideology. And so this is why I like the target to be, how can we express, and this is literally what my entire ministry is devoted to, how can we express our individual and collective human needs in a healthy way? And how do those human needs relate to story and behavior? Right? I mean, that's pretty much everything.
Well, and just to add on to the cult situation, I mean, as I view it now, that type of I refer to it as, say, like highly totalistic types of behaviors, where you have one ideology and everybody's focused on that. Well, everybody does that, or almost all societies do that under times of extreme crisis. So everybody shifts into that mode. The United States was highly cult-like, as much as almost anything during World War II, when like survival was on the line. Everybody drops everything, everybody gets in line. There's not a lot of time or discussion about dissension or alternative models, because everybody's like, this is the model, this is how we survive, let's do this. And anybody who's not on board will, and we can argue the different approaches and the ethics of some of the things that are done during that time. So there are some downsides to that mode. And but everybody, lots of societies do that, including, say, the United States, at different times.
And if I may quickly say that this kind of, let's say, strong arming and having people, be in line is not necessarily, the ideal. And so this is something that definitely should be discussed, whether these cult tactics are justifiable or not. But Jared, let me just quickly just so I understand.
This is why I like saying, like, the question of what context, support, and empowerment do we need? Like, give everyone the best chance to be their better selves. And that's why one of my favorite quips is, what is the greatest threat to religion? It's socialized medicine. And so I love the question of, how can we meet human needs in such a way that we are not desperate for these supernatural, high demand, cult level ideologies. So for example, and then I want to hear your question, sorry about that, Kenneth, so for example, currently there's a high incentivization to like get married, for benefits. But if we had universal health care, there wouldn't be that need to get into these systems that can be very abusive. I mean, things like that. So I think the healthiest religion And the healthiest systems are the ones that are not desperately needed, right? Because ethics is all about context and alternatives. And so, like, gun to your head, we say colloquially, like, anytime we don't have any option but like one option, it's not going to be very healthy. And we are going to, and this is why I love the target of collaborative tribalism, because that's taking seriously the fact that we are all tribalistic and we have these like deep survival mechanisms. So for me, the healthy target is how can we create a context where we as human, like, give our human brain a chance, you know, where we can act out our best and highest impulses. And so this is the framing of our conversation right now about healthy approaches to religion. And so I love, it needs to be very big and expansive and systematic, which is like, how can we talk about all the things? And this is why, and I'm seeing this more and more in social media, which I'm really appreciating, is that discussions about religion also need to be discussions about healthcare, economics, politics, domestic violence. Like, we really need to bring in everything, because it's all, and this is why I love being a human-centered minister, because for me, it's all about the human experience. I don't have these supernatural or religious allegiances that I need to bring in. So what were you going to say?
And this is exactly what I was going to ask, that your definition of religion said transcendent reality. Now, to a sloppy hearer, this might sound like supernatural reality, but is that what you meant?
Well, it's intersubjective reality. And I mean, I don't like the word supernatural, because if it's natural, it exists. I mean, like if it exists, it's natural. And so I do like the differentiation of objective, subjective, intersubjective, which is what is real independent of what we believe, what is real because of what we believe, and then what is real because of what we create together. And culture and society is what is real because of what we create together. And I'm playful using the word transcendent so my definition of transcendent, or the way that I'm using the word, is what are these aspects of human conversation and story that are intersubjective, they're beyond existing reality, and hopefully they are idealistic. You know, they are better. So when I imagine being a better parent than I am, that is a transcendent reality. The idea of what a good parent is transcendent reality. The idea of human improvement is transcendent reality. Like, one of the biggest ways that humans are distinctive, I'm excited to talk about animal religions in just a minute, but one reason why humans are distinctive is because we don't act on just instinct. You know, we can imagine, we can adapt. And one thing that blew my mind about like what the distinctiveness of human beings is, we are the only animal that can cooperate flexibly in large groups. And that seems to be the big difference across tribes. And that seems to be the difference between sapiens and Neanderthals, for example, is Neanderthals, see, as best as I understand, they were amazing, but only in their specific tribes. Whereas Sapiens is able to create super tribes, if only temporarily, and that made all the difference. So again, to come back very, very clearly and precisely, I'm using the word transcendent as something that is beyond current objective biological reality. And again, that's culture. Like, all of human culture, because animals behave in ways that their instincts dictate. So animals like act out their survival instincts, and that's about it. I mean, sure, we can talk about like orcas and wolves and apes and elephants, and there seems to be like some interesting ritualistic behavior. But we as humans, and this is like directly pertinent to religion and how it functions, we as as animals act out their survival instincts, there are some like sparkles, you know, of things that seem to be ritualistic, symbolic behavior. Really quick, we can come back to it. My favorite is the alpha fight among a wolf, because I think that so two, like the potential alpha fights the alpha, right? And one has to die, because you can't have two alphas in the pack or the pack will not survive. And so what happens, and I don't know enough about, animal behavior to be sure about this, but this is my instinct. I think what happens is when the loser exposes their throat and the wolf grabs the throat, that is a ritual death. And so it could, because again, so in that moment of conflict, there are two alphas. The pack cannot tolerate two alphas, so one has to die. So what happens is it symbolically dies, and then when it reemerges, there's a clear alpha, and that competitive alpha is dead, and then there's the like supportive beta. But what is different about humans is Homo sapiens, we raise our children in the imagined realities. And then that creates the behavior that we then fight to protect. Do you see the difference? And this is so, so important. Let's talk. I know I've picked up a lot of things, and then we can break it down. But I'm going to use a provocative example: white supremacy. So when you, like a white American, in this case, like a white male American, when they encounter critical race theory or a different idea, it feels like their survival is threatened. Do you see that difference? So animals are like fighting for their survival, and as they fight for their survival, there are these like interesting, ritualistic, symbolic glimmers. But we're the opposite. And this is Yuval Harari's argument, is that for sapiens, imagination is more important than reality. And this is like, we can precisify here, but it's because culture, society, is that we create our imagined reality, and then we demand that every member of our culture adhere to that. And if they don't adhere to it, we will kill them, either literally or symbolically.
But how does this imagined reality then emerge, and why? I mean, why does it emerge? What is the benefit to members of the group or the society? Because any coercion, and even at the threat of potential death, it sounds like a cruel thing. So why does it then emerge?
Cruelty is a culture, like cruelty is a human imagination. Like there's just survival. Like nature doesn't care, like nature is cruel in her efficiency. And like another thing we can come back to is one thing that really challenges me is that, and again, I want to come back to this, is that religion works the best when you don't know how it works. And I think this is a very, very important part of current discussions about religion, because I saw like the 10th District Court definition of religion. There hasn't been like a Supreme Court definition of religion, but the 10th District Court judgment on a humanist inmate who wanted a humanist religious services, included a definition of religion that said supernatural. So why religion exists is because there is nothing more important for humans than the survival of the group. And there is nothing that has ever been more powerful in human culture than religion. Because what Dan Dennett talks about this, as well as Pascal Boyer and others, the basic idea is that, so we are social creatures. And one thing that, like one reason why we're destroying the world is because humans are apex predators in groups and pathetic little wimps as individuals. And so like we are apex predators with inferiority complexes, and that makes us so dangerous. We're like sheep with machine guns, because like apex predators are really chill, like they don't care, but we are incredibly insecure. And so I think this is essential to remember as we're discussing religious behavior, because our survival impulse is that we will do whatever we have to do to maintain this like apex predator group relationship. So let's think about tribal behavior. So what happens is, and sports is tribal. Sports is a really, really good example of this. So in sports practice, the individual members are going to be like teasing each other, competing with each other. And this is like Jonathan Haidt talks about getting everyone in the same boat. And so they're going to be like picking on each other and stuff at practice, right? But as soon as they are playing against another team, they become incredibly cohesive. Like even if they don't like a particular member of their team, like they're going to work flawlessly with every member of their team, because if they pick on any member of their team, they're going to sabotage their survival. And that's what happens is like when there's a group of Homo sapiens, they're going to have like they're bickering, they're going to fight for their status and so forth. They're going to be competing for resources. But as soon as another tribe threatens them, they're going to become incredibly cohesive. Now, here is the genius of religion. Religion creates an imaginary ally and enemy and identity. Like religion puts the battle in your head, and religion makes the battle all the time. Isn't like this is why it is so uniquely effective. So, for example, without at a survival level, you're going to have a tribe of sapiens doing its thing day to day, trying to survive. And then as soon as like the pack of lions comes in, everyone's going to band together and be at like this heightened level, this of working together to survive, right? And then as soon as the lions are chased away or defeated or whatever, they're going to like celebrate, which is ritual behavior, but then they're just going to go back to their normal survival thing. But the genius of imagined realities is that what if there are always lions threatening them? What if there are lion spirits threatening them? And this is religion. As Dan Dennett says, religion is domesticated superstition that requires you to always work together. And once you are structured, so when there is intermittent danger, you occasionally band together at this exceptional heightened level, right? But if there is always this supernatural imagined danger, you design your entire life, your entire structure around survival against this imagined danger. And and then even beyond that, your identity becomes everything that you need to do in order to survive this constant imagined danger. And then there become particular identities of the priests and specialists and shamans who are experts in protecting against the imagined danger. And then that's brilliant. And this works. Like again, this is the basis of culture. So for example, I'll be quiet in a moment. But so for example, I am going to be most motivated when I feel like I'm starving, right? Like I'm going to be lazy, not lazy, but I'm going to function at a lower level until I feel like I'm starving, and then I'm going to be super, super motivated to fight for survival. Well, the myth of employment, like the employment religion says, if you don't show up to work at 8 a.m., your survival is at risk. It's not really, but we have like the brilliance of culture is that we have created imagined realities that engage this heightened level of fighting for survival when we aren't actually dying. And so capitalism and employment and economy in general is brilliant because we have tricked ourselves and said, like, if you don't go to work, like if you don't function as a good employee, your survival is at risk. Anyway, so bringing that all together, religion is so powerful because religion is able to engage that like heightened interest, like heightened survival interest, both individually and collectively, at a consistent level, whether or not there is something currently threatening your survival. So sometimes when I have a very high degree of anxiety, because I run pretty anxious, one of my mantras is like, my body is safe. My body is safe. And for better and worse, religion is able to convince you that you are in danger almost constantly. And so you feel relief and you feel safe when you are acting out the rituals. And this is why I say everything is a religion, because they can be political ideologies, they can be racial ideologies, they can be economic ideologies. So like, again, the way that humans work is we are born and raised into these imagined realities, things like countries and class and race, as well as religion. And then we experience a threat to those ideologies as a threat to our survival. And so this is why, like, one of the interesting things about conversion, and I know we can go back and like go through.
Jared, actually, it's good. I was just going to say that since you have covered the topic of how religion emerges, you and I know that you have to leave in about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And I was just going to suggest that go ahead, give us your ideas about how conversion happens, and even also maybe if you want to comment on how faith is maintained. Just go ahead, use up the rest of the 10 minutes that you have available, and then John and we will discuss what you have said, and then maybe we'll just add our own thoughts also. So I think it's been good. It's been very interesting.
That way we can discuss when you're not here to defend any of your ideas. No, but I think your perspectives are super interesting and unique, and so much of the history, the theory of religion, are models and inferences to what currently exists anyway, and you've captured like really in anyway great terms all of many of the current theories about how religion did emerge and why it's so useful and why it's part of us.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. So I was invited to a debate on is religion valuable years ago. And one of the things that I said in my opening statement is it's impossible to discuss the value of religion because we have no non-religious counterfactual reality to compare. So like even, and this is why I love Yuval Harari's framing, and others have said this as well. Like I love the framing that like all culture is religion. And I love, like evolutionary psychology and this evolutionary approach to social science. So the important thing as far as conversion goes is that so as human beings, we only survive as individuals within a group. And we don't, again, I'll emphasize the fact that with the comforts of the modern world also creates like deadly dangers that we can talk about another time. But with the comforts of the modern world, we can have these evolutionary needs met at a level that we then take for granted. And so then we can nitpick. Like one reason why apocalypse fiction is powerful is because we get to imagine if everything collapsed, how would we behave? My son, who's in basic training right now, he and I just finished the show The Expanse, and in the final season, one of the characters, my favorite, Amos, says we are always like life is always this level of tribe, working to survival. Like I've always lived my life this way. The rest of society is catching up. And so this is why I'm such a passionate advocate for cultural structure. Like I'm not worried about the survival of the human species. I'm worried about the survival of civilization, because the human species will stick around for a long time, but we are going to make life very, very uncomfortable for us. And so this gets to conversion, because the way the way that we survive as individuals is that we have a tremendous amount of flexibility in our minds. So this is imagined realities. One of the things that has most helped me in my life is to be very, very precise about current versions of myself. Before we started recording, I was sharing with you two that I've had a very difficult week because I have had a situation that has inspired and challenged me to imagine a version of myself that I previously could not. And that is conversion. Like, conversion is where you imagine and then become a version of yourself that you previously could not have imagined. And when we get to the levels of like, and so there's a continuum here from like, I'm going to have a civil conversation and change my mind, to cult level programming, right? So I'm going to have a civil conversation and change my mind is like a really nice high degree of freedom, high degree of safety. Whereas cult programming, it takes a tremendous level of effort and investment to basically almost override someone's personal choice to whatever degree that works, right? And what we need to acknowledge is that all of our social conditioning is functionally cult level programming. Because when you are raised, I would tell my world religion students that there's no more powerful word than normal. Like, what is normal? And I admit that I like subverting the idea of normal, break it open, build it better. And so we, again, in our society, we are told this is how you behave. And this is one reason why conservatives are having such a hard time right now in Western and US culture, is because our conversation is accelerating so fast. And previously silenced and marginalized conversations are being brought to the center. And so people panic. Okay, back to conversion. So the way that we survive in a group, and Buddhism is that we have multiple potential selves that we access. And we already do this. So one of my favorite insights from Buddhism is that one Buddhist principle is not self, which means, but what it really means is there's no self in particular. And most of us are in denial, or at least we are unconscious about the idea that there is a Kenneth at home or a John at home. And that, in fact, one of the therapeutic interventions that I want to design for my prison job is I want to help correctional officers decrease their trauma and moral injury by having a video that invites them to say, okay, what is your best self at work? What is your best self at home? What is your best self in this relationship? What is your best self with your friends? And the thing about conversion, the starting point is that we need to acknowledge that internal family systems, if anyone has seen Inside Out, internal family systems brings to awareness the fact that we are not one coherent person. We are a whole constellation of identities and stories. And so what happens when we experience conversion is that we are able to access a different story about ourselves, usually, well, virtually always, because we encounter another group, another tribe that has a powerful story about themselves. So what we're doing as individuals is we are saying, and this is the power of humanity, is we are saying, I am going to either make the conscious choice or I am going to be overwhelmingly influenced, and usually some combination of that, to like join another group's story. And then finally, how is religion? And then one thing that's really important to keep in mind is that all of us have competing stories, competing identities, competing loyalties, right? And so this is one thing that makes it so painful. I talked last week to a military chaplain, an LDS military chaplain, who said, I feel alienated from my faith but I can't leave because it's my job. Super interesting, right? And so we are constantly having to ask ourselves, how, and I think we're overly individualistic in our culture, but it's this question of like, if anything were an option, what story about myself? So like, what is my relationship to myself? And that is like integrity and this sense of like self-awareness. And then how do I express that self in these different contexts? And so, for example, we have our family of origin self, we have our employment self, we have our religion self. And what happens with conversion is we usually prioritize a particular identity of a particular group. And so, for example, if someone converts to the LDS church and their family is distressed, or if someone realizes that they are gay, and within our current culture, it's like, am I going to shift more weight of my identity into this, like, into like the, so there's the gay, I mean, I don't like, so like if I'm a gay Mormon, for example, I'm going to say like there's my family of origin identity, there's my gay identity, there's my Mormon identity, and a lot of people are going through this. And this is how we have to navigate it. And so conversion is where we prioritize one part of our identity and then defend it against the other parts of identity. And one of the things that's unexpected is the more difficult this is and the more conflict there is around this experience, the stronger the conversion is going to be. And then I do need to go to church, actually. So just to wrap it up, how faith is maintained. The deepest human impulses are we want to maintain safety, relationship, and story. And one of the most brilliant and challenging things about being human is that our story is just tied right in to our safety and relationship. And so what happens physiologically and psychologically, nature is very efficient, is that, and our brains are literally evolved this way, where there's like our lizard brain, our mammal brain, our primate brain, and then our human prefrontal cortex. And so what happens is we have these like survival impulses, then we have our comfort impulses, then we have our social impulses, then we have our thinky impulses. And the brilliant thing about the human brain is that we experience our emotions as if they're our survival, we experience our sociality as if it's survival, and then we experience our ideas as if it's our survival. Isn't that wild? So when we have a broken heart, when we are sad because we're rejected by someone, we literally feel like we're dying. And then, so if we're rejected, if we are hurt emotionally, we feel like we're dying. If we're rejected socially, we feel like we're dying. And then if someone disagrees with our strongly held beliefs, we feel like we're dying. Isn't that wild? And so this is so important to remember as we're talking, especially across belief systems, is we need to deeply respect where someone else is. And this is, I'll end on this note. Productive conversation requires us to be able to maintain a sense of safety and relationship. Because again, like those are the priorities. And what often happens, this is the triangulation paradox, where there's you, there's the person you're talking to, then there's what you're talking about. And so if I say, like, you're such a mess, why can't you clean your room? You're attacking the other person and bringing up this problem. Like one of the greatest paradoxes I've ever learned is that attacking someone about a problem will never, ever, ever work, because you're strengthening the relationship between them and the problem, and you're weakening the relationship between you and the person. And so this applies to discussions around faith, religion, ideology, and politics. I love my new lieutenant at the prison. He's amazing. He's very, very, very conservative. And so we have very different ideologies. In fact, he's like, I don't know if you want to know what podcasts I listen to. And what was going on there is we are establishing this very, very strong relationship of respect that enables the safety for us and the relationship for us to discuss difference. Do you see how that means? how that works. So on that note, I need to go. But in a nutshell, religion is so powerful, and religion emerged because religion used our ability to imagine to create safety in relationship. So one of the most powerful things about religion is that, like, an abused child can imagine a loving God. I literally just had a conversation about the fact that my relationship with God, I have never felt that, like, I love you, I'm here for you. We can unpack that sometime. But what I feel from God is like, attaboy, work harder. That's not the healthiest thing, you know? But it's made me who I am. But I do know that there are some people, and this saves lives, who are like, my mom and my dad abuse me, but I know Jesus loves me. Or, you know, I'm abused, I'm in this terrible, terrible, dangerous environment, but I know that I have the Buddha, you know, as a refuge. Or my country is in conflict, but I know Allah loves me. Isn't that amazing? So this is so incredible. Like, we have been able, like, religion and spirituality and imagination and ideology has, and of course it's also killing us, you know, which is like, I need to kill myself for my job. But it's so powerful because no matter what even our social environment is, we have access to this, like, God loves me, or the spirits love me, or the ancestors want me to work hard. I mean, this is incredibly powerful. And so our stories also catalyze conversion. And then I think fundamentally how faith is maintained is because the function of religion and spirituality gives us a sense of safety and relationship. And the funny thing is that when other humans attack that, it only makes it stronger. So we will fight to maintain that safety and that relationship. So, for example, one of the functions of God is that God is the internalized personification of social norms. So I'll just leave it at that. Appreciate the conversation.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you very much.
That was awesome.
Take care, Jared. Have a good day.